God's plan for your life, it is not a tightrope. And I think sometimes we get stuck because we're on this tightrope, and I think I'm going to be on this forever, and I'm doing this balancing act of trying to keep it all together, and I think I have to do that forever. But it's not a tightrope. It's a river. And you just jump in and say, God, I want to follow you. And if you can genuinely be open to that and be open to where he takes you, I think that every action in your life will feel more purposeful.
This is the Take a Step podcast, where we help faith-driven young men reject complacency and take purposeful action every day. My name's Josh Johnston. Let's take a step. Welcome back to the Take a Step podcast, guys. Today we've got my good buddy Jake Williams, who leads the college ministry at Woodstock City Church. Jake, what's going on?
Not much, man. Just hanging out. Summer in college ministry is pretty chill. So in the office, just hanging, trying to make up some stuff to do.
Love it. Awesome. Well, I want to kind of just get it kicked off. I'd love to just give you a second just to briefly introduce yourself, however you think it makes sense.
Yeah, that's great. Well, you said, my name is Jake. Lead a college ministry called The Living Room at Woodstock City, which is really, really fun. We kind of primarily reach like Kennesaw State. We got some Reinhardt students, Chat Tech, that kind of thing. But yeah, really, we are just a ministry for college students, college-aged adults, anyone in that season of life. Personally, I grew up kind of south. I used to be really offended by this, and people would call it South Georgia because it's middle Georgia. But now that I live in the Atlanta area, I understand why people refer to it as South Georgia. So I grew up in South Georgia, a city called Dublin. Not much there. Graduated from a really small private Christian school. Went to the University of Georgia. Had plans my whole life of being a doctor. Was a biology major. Graduated a biology major. But kind of along the way, just felt like God was kind of maybe stirring my heart towards ministry. I felt like I was filling all of my free time with ministry things and volunteer things at church, when I was probably supposed to be doing like shadowing doctors and doing internships and those sorts of things. And then my senior year, I met my mom at the Chili's in Millersville, which is halfway between Dublin and Athens, and kind of told her, I was like, Mom, I think I want to go into full-time ministry, expecting a like, what are you talking about? Like, that's crazy. Like, you know, put all this money and effort and time. And my mom was just like, I could have told you that freshman year for you. And I'm like, what? I just wasted all this time, you know, like you could have said something. But I think it was just one of those things that I had to learn for myself and kind of watch God steer my heart. I think if you would have told me my freshman year of college, you're going to go into ministry, I'd be like, no way. Partially because I didn't have a concept of what that would be like, because I grew up in a small town. Like, no one works in ministry in a small town. Like, there's the pastor and like maybe like a children's minister type thing, but I didn't think I could make a career doing something that I love like this. I just thought it was something I'd do on the side forever, which I think I could have done and been happy with that. But yeah, it's just really cool to watch the way God orchestrated that. And so from college, I graduated with a biology degree and then went to full-time seminary, Dallas Theological Seminary, while working for North Point. Ironically, starting with high school students at Woodstock City. And then I went and started a high school ministry, or kind of helped launch a high school ministry at another one of our campuses in the Atlanta area in Buford. And then a couple years into that, I felt like God was pulling me back towards college ministry, which is really sweet because I feel like for a lot of people that work in ministry, you end up working at the place where like God changed your life the most. And while I didn't start following Jesus in college, I definitely feel like that's where he got a hold of my heart. And so it's really fun to kind of get to do that now. And so, yep, that's what I do now. I live in Roswell currently, like 20 minutes down the road, getting married in October, which is really exciting. And so Caroline's my fiance's name. We've got a dog named Betty. She's the best, named after Betty White. She's the best. She sheds a lot, but she's really, really great. And so, yeah, that's me.
Awesome. What's your headspace like right now with college ministry over the summer, trying to figure out and plan for that, trying to plan a wedding out at the same time? I bet that's a stressful season.
It is and it isn't. I think it's just one of those things where I don't know, like part of it is maybe I'm just chill now and then a little bit I won't be, but we've been really blessed. We've been able to hire a planner. My fiance works for the Braves and plans events all day. And so she's like, I do not want to come home from my job of planning events to plan another event. And so we've got some people working on that for us, which has been really, really helpful. So we're involved in the big decisions, but for the most part, we're kind of like, hey, just tell us what to do and we'll do it. So that's been
Yeah.
really, really nice. College ministry is not the case. I'm the one telling us what to do and when to do it and all the things. So, but it's fun. I feel like this summer you get to kind of like reset. You kind of get to look back and evaluate the year, get ready for another year, kind of, especially like plan. We're bringing some new interns and part-time staff onto our team. So it's kind of nice to kind of reset and get to work on it because the rest of the year you're working in it. And so it's nice to
Yep.
kind of evaluate and think about all the things. So
Hey guys, we'll jump right back into the conversation, but I want to give y'all a quick look into MMP Customs. They make all of the Take a Step apparel, and they are the official sponsor of the Take a Step podcast. Check them out.
Hey guys, I'm Nathan Mooney, co-owner of MMP Customs. We are a custom merchandise company specializing in screen printing and embroidery. If you're a business, band, school, or any other type of organization that needs custom merchandise, MMP Customs is the place. Whether you have a big apparel need for an event or need to outfit your company, we offer a no minimum guarantee and have never missed an approved deadline. At MMP Customs, you will experience the best customer service there is. Let our family outfit yours. Visit mmpcustoms.com. That's mmpcustoms.com.
Yeah, it's kind of cool to look at it from a business perspective like that because a lot of people talk about, I'm constantly working in the business where I don't get to work on the business. It sounds like that's kind of the season that you're in right now. Cool. Well, there was a lot you talked about in your intro that I want to dive into, specifically the transition from going from the mindset of I'm working and trying to grow and become a doctor to stepping into the world of ministry. And you alluded to, the idea that, how am I going to build a career in ministry and talk about a transition there. You're going from focusing on building a career as a doctor, extremely driven, extremely, head to the grindstone, like just growth constantly, into ministry, just complete polar opposites as far as like what your expectations are in the long term. And from a young guy's perspective, a lot of what we do when we're younger, as far as building the foundation for where we go in, is very financially driven. So, and I can imagine just with, how driven you were to become a doctor and have the achievement and just from that mindset, making the shift into the world of ministry. I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about how your mindset had to change going from, one to the other.
Yeah, no, yeah, definitely. There's definitely a lot of shifting that had to happen because, especially when you're like in high school, thinking about what you want to do in college. I mean, everyone's like top 10 jobs that make the most money. You're like trying to like pick something and, I'm in like the, what top 10 medical careers that make the, and trying to figure out what I want to do from a financial perspective, because that's kind of what we're taught. And like, I didn't grow up like in money, which is probably helpful because I'm now not going to be in money, a family of money either, but I definitely didn't grow up around money. And so like in my mindset, that was the thing. Like, I'm just going to make money. I'm going to live a different life than I grew up living. And that was the driving factor for sure, which is why I think I said this. I think I would have had a really hard time my freshman year and sophomore year of college, even my junior year, as I'm like studying for the medical college admissions test and applying to medical schools. And I would have had a really hard time if someone be like, hey, no, actually, you're going to go work for a church and make way less than what you're wanting to make. But I think what shifted like in my mindset was realizing that like really what happened was I kind of hit pause. I took the MCAT going into the summer of right before my senior year of college. I applied to a couple medical schools, really just applied to one. I had a couple that I would have applied to had I not gotten into the first one, the Medical College of Georgia. But when I got in, there was something that was like, I did it. There was this moment of like, you achieved it, the thing that you've been wanting your whole life, you did. And then that faded so fast. And I almost like panicked. Like, I don't think this is actually what I want to do. Like, this isn't actually what brings me joy. It's just what I anticipate will bring me money. And I think that was the shift that I made was, did I love anatomy and biology and all those things? Yes. Those are my favorite classes. I love learning about the body. In fact, I still do. I still love learning science related things, but, in terms of like what I'm going to do 9 to 5, what my career is going to be, I think I had a hard time, realizing that, man, this isn't the thing that I consider fun. Now, not all of us we don't go into our job and be like, oh, how am I going to have fun? Like that's not necessarily
Mm-hmm.
the number one motivator, but I don't know if it was, and that point in my life, I would have said fun, but I think now looking back, I would have said fulfilling. And what I was doing, I was in a fraternity, a Christian fraternity at the time, kind of getting to experience like putting structure around small groups and kind of programming worship nights, all things ironically that I do now. But at the time, like that was just what was joyful to me. That's what I loved thinking about. That's where my mind went when I wasn't working on school. That was the place that my mind went. And I remember being I think it was my junior year. Annie F. Downs, who's a speaker and an author, came to our college ministry, and she repeated something that had been repeated to her that I'm just going to repeat now, and we'll just keep passing this along. But it was this idea that like God's will for your life isn't a tightrope; it's a river, and as long as you're just like trying your best to follow God, like I think sometimes we get so wrapped up in God's like specific will for our life, meaning like what we do, where we do it, who we marry, what city we live in, when really like yes, God has specific plans for your life, but there's also this general will that's like this river that you just jump in and you're like, God, I just want to follow you and whatever that looks like. And I think when I realized that I wanted to follow God because that was like whatever plans he had was gonna far exceed whatever I had planned. I think that's when I kind of let go of this like, oh, I'm gonna make a lot of money, because what I realized was, man, making a lot of money would be great, but living out my purpose and being fulfilled in the work that I'm doing matters more to me than, because at the end of the day, like I'm not going to look back and be like, man, I made a lot of money and I, have this incredible retirement. Like that's not what I want to look back on my life and see. And part of that's just the kingdom mindset of being a follower of Jesus. You don't want to look back on your life and be like, wow, I have this huge, you know, Roth IRA set up. Like that would be awesome. But at the end of the day, like I'd rather look back and be like, man, like I was faithful to what God was calling me to, even though it felt scary. And so I think it was a lot of little shifts. I don't think there was like one like big moment. I think along the way, God was slowly shifting my heart. And I really think he was doing that all 4 years that I was in college. I think I didn't realize it until I started, working in this. And then I don't know, I look back and people all the time are like, do you regret it? Do you ever wish that you would have gone to med school? And I laugh when I tell people this, but I think because it just describes my personality, I think getting into medical school was good enough for me to be like, okay, I could have done it. But
Yeah.
when I think back to like, but what I'm doing now, there's not a day that I'm like, man, I wish I was doing something else. Because I do feel like this is what I was created to do. I tell our students all the time, like God's will for your life is at the crosshairs of like, what am I good at and what am I passionate about? And if you can figure those two things out, what do I love to do and what am I really good at? What naturally, usually if you can find a career there, like that's what God created you to do. Like God
Yep.
does create us to do specific things. And so I think when you figure that out, like there's no amount of money that can compare to that.
Yeah. So like for you, how would you answer that question? Like what is the in the crosshairs of what you're good at and what you're passionate about?
Yeah, I feel like what I'm passionate about is, and this feels like a cop out because I'm a pastor, but it's true. Like what I'm passionate about is like helping people follow Jesus, and specifically, like I'm hyper organized, hyper type A. I love putting systems around things that make it easier for people to take the name of of this to take a step towards following Jesus and to get in a small group or to get connected to a mentor or figure out how to get baptized, like whatever we can do to help people follow Jesus the next step, whatever that looks like for them. Like I love putting systems around that, and I think that's what I'm really good at because God has given me this like very like systems and like organized, wired, but also a make it better kind of person. Like I'm always like trying to workshop like, okay, how do we make that more efficient? How do we make that more clear? How do we make that easier for someone? Not
Mm-hmm.
because following Jesus is supposed to be convenient. I do think there's some cultural Christianity that gets tied into making following Jesus too convenient, but it shouldn't be complicated. Like it shouldn't be difficult for someone to do that. And I think the times that I've been able to walk with someone clearly, I mean, I think about being in college and the things that I was naturally gravitating towards was like kind of discipling guys that were younger than me and helping them figure out how to best follow Jesus with their next step. Like that was so life giving to me, but I also felt like it was something that God wired me to do. And so, yeah, I feel like it's kind of a no brainer now. But again, I didn't have a concept for what my job is now. when I was younger, but now I look back and I'm like, man, this is exactly what God wired me to do. He wired me to be a leader of a team and to work through systems and to manage things that sometimes doesn't feel like church. It feels like a business. You said that earlier. Like it can feel a little bit like a business, but also like administration is a spiritual gift that we read about in scripture. And I just feel like
Yeah.
that's something that God has gifted me to do. And I really, really enjoy doing it and seeing the fruit of it. So yeah.
Yeah, it kind of sounds like you took the strengths that come from, um, what it takes to be a star student and that gets into medical school, that
Mm,
passes the exam. Like and we've spoken before about it, but where you were in that phase of like the achievements and
mm,
being able to feel like you've accomplished something,
yeah.
but it's cool to take that mindset and apply it to the ministry.
Yeah.
It kind of like you took the strength and applied it to somewhere that actually needed it.
Mm,
And it sounds like you've kind of been able to see the payoffs of that. But going back to the concept of achievements, I know
mm,
that's something that we've talked about before. When you were on that path of working to become a doctor and passing the exams and getting into medical school, what was the shift like for you to take, in a very professionally, financially driven world? What was the shift like for you to now step, like, did you see challenges
mm,
mentally when you stepped into this world of ministry, which is a lot more focused on, being present and,
yeah.
focusing on the day rather than focusing on, your drive to accomplish
Yep.
something in the future?
Yeah. Yeah. No, there definitely was a shift. I think the reason that I wanted to be a doctor, truthfully, was all wrapped up in what people are going to think about me.
Mm,
Um, like this is not a flex, sort of, but I graduated valedictorian of my class in high school, and I just kept thinking like I have to do something impressive. People, have to see me and like, the reunion that, you have whenever that happens. I don't even know, 10 years, I guess. Like I want to go back and be like, man, look at this career that I've built. Look at all these things that I've done. And it was all wrapped up in what are people going to think about me? Um, and that just is the thing that I always like naturally drift back to, that I have to pull myself out of is, what are people going to think about me? Henry Nouwen, who's a Dutch priest, talks about the three lies that we believe about our identity. I am what I do, I am what I have, and I am what other people say about me. And I think I can hit every single one of those boxes. Um, Whether that's getting even now as a pastor, like I can get my identity wrapped up in work. I can get my identity wrapped up in how many students are coming to the living room, or, like what people say about the living room, or what people are thinking about me as a pastor, and the latest thing that I've preached. Like, I heard someone joke one time, but I was like, that actually feels very real. That's like, you're only as good as your most recent sermon. And it's like, well, the times that I've flopped, which happens, like I walk away and go, oh my gosh, was I made for this? All because I wrapped my identity up in it. And so the very same thing that was driving me to become a doctor is the same lie I feel like I still get trapped in now, that like I have to be impressive. I have to do things. And I've got to pull myself out of that. From time to time I look up and realize like, man, like this, like I can do a lot of things. What I've learned is I can do a lot of things like working for God,
yeah.
but like being with God is so much greater and more fulfilling. And all the things I do for him are in overflow, but that's not where my identity comes from. But the second that I put my identity, even in working for God, I've misplaced it. And I think that's what a lot of people do in every field, like whether you're in ministry or not. I think people put their identity in whether it's, the job they have, or the stuff that they own, and the size house that they have, or the car they drive, or the relationship that they're in or not in. Like, I think that it becomes such a source of identity. And no matter what, you don't have to be a pastor for that to trick you and trap you. It gets all of us in some way. And I think the enemy, Satan, whatever you want to call him, the devil, like the the spiritual warfare that we experience naturally tends to pull us back to that thing, to get us distracted from what we were actually created to do, because he gets us so focused on ourselves, and my identity is wrapped up in myself. But when I can even take my identity and put it back on, what God says about me,
Yeah.
then all of a sudden, like, I'm freed up to actually do what I was created to do, not do something in the name of me, but do something in the name of Jesus, or in the name of God.
Do you think struggling with that, or I don't want to say struggling, but do you think navigating that journey of battling, where you truly find your identity has equipped you to better help people and help other people navigate that path for themselves?
Yeah, and I would use the word struggling, because I think it is, and I think it's a lifelong struggle because our natural tendency is to focus on self, um, and yeah, I do think that helps. It helps me understand because at the end of the day, we all struggle with the same thing. We all struggle with, everyone's favorite topic of conversation is themselves. Everyone is focused on themselves. You walk into a room and you're self-conscious because you're thinking about what are people thinking about me, but everyone
Mm,
else is thinking about what people are thinking about them. So, like I think we all struggle with that to a degree. And so it makes it easier to kind of like as people are, I mean, I feel like every week there's a couple people that'll come up at the end of a sermon and want you to pray with them or help them to walk through something, which I love doing. And because I have walked this life in sometimes similar seasons, sometimes different seasons, but I can still spot the same thing. That's like, hey, sometimes we're so focused on ourselves, whether it's like in a selfish, prideful way, or it's just in like a I can't see that God has something bigger or that there's more to this, or we're so inward focused, if that makes sense. Like I
yeah.
think it's helped me spot that a lot faster. And I don't know. I still think there's days when I have to. I'm not really sure how to pull myself out of it. Like I'm not going to claim to be an expert on that. I feel like a lot of that just comes with wisdom of life, and I'm sure there's a lot of older people who've figured that out a lot better than I have. But I do think that because I walked through that and had to give something up, because I think sometimes we use the word struggle, but we're not actually trying to fight something. We're just trying to manage it. But I really had to struggle because I had to let it go. Like I had to let go that this job of being a doctor is going to be my identity. That it forced me. It's like, okay, now I'm embracing a career that isn't about me and isn't about the stuff that I'm going to have, the money I'm going to make. And so because I had to actually let something go, and then I experienced the freedom from it, I think I have a lot more empathy, yes, for understanding people where they're at, but also like I feel like I'm better able to encourage because I've seen the fruit and the freedom that comes from letting go and putting your identity somewhere else than in your stuff and all those things.
Yeah. Like you talked about it a second ago, but like the battle of pointing the focus internal versus pointing the focus external.
Mm,
I've talked with a lot of people over the past couple years that have, whether if it's struggling with different anxieties or different levels of depression. And I'm no counselor, so I have no qualifications to back this, but from what I've seen so often is like the idea of anxieties and depression is very focused on self, right?
mm,
It's how can I be more happy? How can I have more peace? How can I experience more joy? Because people who are in those positions feel like something's weighing down on them, so they're trying to fix themselves. And something I've seen in conversations that I've had is, the second we shift that focus from how can I get better versus, all right, how can I shift the focus off myself completely and
yeah,
start figuring out how can I add value to other people around me. Adding value to other people gives you a sense of purpose. It gives you a sense of value to the world. And
yep,
it sounds like from where you're coming from, like the same concept applies to the profession that you choose rather than, and not to say that it's wrong to, choose to be a doctor.
sure, yeah,
Doctors
yeah,
are
yeah,
great. There are many great doctors, but at the end of the day, from, where your head was at, it's very cool to hear you talk about that shift of choosing a career because you were so focused on what you could get out of the career,
mm,
now navigating this life in a career where
yeah,
it's all focused on everyone else because you really have nothing to gain, right? It's
right,
all
yeah,
focused on
yeah,
how can you help other people experience Jesus and live a life alongside him, because that's the focus of what you're doing.
right, right. Which I don't know. I would say to kind of push back, I do think that there is something to gain for a lot of people, whether it's like in a pastoral field, especially in the world that we live in, where there's celebrity pastors and all the things. Like it can easily you can easily slide into that
Yeah.
mentality of this is about the platform, or this is about being whatever. Like you can talk yourself into all that. In fact, I don't think you have to talk yourself into it because that's naturally where you want to go. So I do think that there is still some of that and everything. And to your point, like even if I would have decided, I'm going to be a doctor, I still think in order to be effective, especially be effective in the kingdom of God, I would have had to shift my mindset to, I'm not doing this to make a paycheck. I'm not doing this to
Yeah.
be impressive. I'm doing this because this is the way that I'm choosing to glorify God. Like I tell people all the time, like, it's not just people who work at the church who are in ministry. Like, we're all in ministry. It's just the vocation that you choose is an avenue in which you do ministry. Like you can be in ministry by working at a local church. You can also be in ministry by being a doctor, working for a corporate firm. You could be in ministry by being a stay-at-home mom or stay-at-home dad. Like, you can be in ministry by being a TikTok influencer. Like literally whatever. I mean, that's what Paul writes in Colossians 3:17. He says, whatever you do, we talk about it TLR in terms of whatever, whenever, whoever, wherever, like whatever you, not like a flippant, like whatever, but like whatever you do, wherever you are, whenever it is, whoever you're with, you do it all to the glory of God. And so I think you have to make that shift regardless of whether you're in, whether you're in a ministry career or not. Like, I think in any career, even in a ministry career, you have to make that shift of like, why am I doing this actually? And if it's anything to do with me, then I'm not going to be effective, and it's not going to be as fulfilling.
Yeah. Like the whole concept of trusting God's providence, I think comes to mind in a big way, especially when you start living that mindset of like shifting the focus off of myself and onto the world around me, and specifically onto like, how am I fulfilling God's purpose for my life? Where I've struggled, and I'd love to hear your take on this, I've struggled a lot, especially recently, with navigating this world of personal growth, of having and embracing a growth mindset,
Yeah.
to navigating that paired with trusting God's providence at the same time. Because in the whole idea of a growth mindset is like, how can I constantly be focused on becoming the best version of myself and the best version of myself that God's called me to be. And I think my default with that, and I would imagine a lot of guys who listen to podcasts like this and read the self-help books, I feel like our default is to go to what can we control when things start to spin out of hand. And I've realized that whenever I start to try to control my life more is when it naturally falls apart just a little bit more.
Yeah.
And I experience the overwhelm because I feel like I'm trying to put everything on my shoulders. Something that Turner Lee, who I had on the last podcast, he's building a woodworking business, and he said something on the last podcast that was incredible that I've never heard. He said, there are more capable shoulders to bear the weight of your anxiety.
Yeah.
And he was referring to Philippians 4 verses 4-8, when God tells you to cast all your anxieties upon him. So I know that was a lot, but I'd love to hear from you. Like, how would you recommend somebody, a young guy that's in this phase of trying to grow and trying to develop and build the foundation for their life while trusting God's providence at the same time?
Yeah. I think the fallacy in all of that is believing that those are two separate things. Is that me building a life, for me, building a career, or me growing as a human, as a man, as a husband, as a father? I think viewing that and viewing trusting God with my life, sometimes we see those two things as separate things, but it's really one thing. If you're a follower of Jesus, it should be one thing. In fact, later in Colossians, I mentioned Colossians 17, where Paul says, whatever you do, do it all in the name of Jesus. And then later in the same chapter, Paul is writing, to this church in Colossae, and he says, you work hard, not as you're working for human masters, but you're working for God. In fact, he's not just talking, he talks to wives, he talks to husbands, he talks to slaves at the time. Like, literally, as a slave, you should work not as you're working for your master, but even in this position as a slave, you're working for God. Even in this position of a husband or a wife or whatever, you're working for God. And I think that for a lot of times we think, as we're trying to grow, I have to ask myself, well, who am I trying to please in doing this? Like, I was even thinking about this morning, I was at the gym, and I was like, why am I here? Like, yeah, I want to get stronger, but like, if I'm just trying to get stronger and like build muscle so that I look better, then I've missed the point. Like, literally, like, I was even like, my wheels started spinning. Like, I wonder what the origin of the gym was, and like what the point of the of the first gym was, because like they weren't doing that back in, 0 AD, like when Jesus was around. Like they weren't going to LA Fitness or One Life and trying to, like, you know, bulk up. It was all functional. It was like, I need to be strong so that I can work hard, so that I can glorify God. And I think that if the end at the end effect is not us, or the end cause is not us glorifying, if it doesn't all come back to glorifying God, then I think we've missed the point of what it means to grow in the first place. Because yeah, I want to
Yeah.
be a better pastor because I want to be more effective at pointing people to God. Yeah, I want to be a better communicator because I want to more clearly communicate the good news of the gospel. Yeah, I want to be a better, husband one day because my wife deserves to experience the love that comes from God. Like, yeah, I want to be a better father because I want to raise and disciple my kids so that they can know the love of not just their earthly father, but their heavenly father. Like, all of it has to point back to, like, that's where those two things come together is yeah, I want to grow. I want to grow a business because I want to be the best and most effective so that I can point people back to God. Like, that is the Great Commission. That's what all of us, if you've put your faith in Jesus, that's what we've all been called to do is to make disciples of all people. And the way that we do that might be different, but everything in my mindset, even as I'm trying to grow, it needs to be, I want to be a more self-aware person so that the person on the other side of me experiences the love and the grace of God. And, in any way that you're trying to grow, like that needs to be the mindset, is it's all an avenue for that. And I think that feels so radical because in America, we have been taught that, like, I don't know, this is kind of a fresh idea. So walk with me here, but I kind
Yeah.
of feel like for a lot of us, we think that, not that God, I'm not trying to say that God isn't loving and merciful, but like that's all we see him as. And like, it's almost as if subconsciously we think like it would be nice for me to give God, my Monday morning. It would be a really great thing for me to do that. And it's like, it's not that it would just be a great thing for you to do, but he's worthy of it and he's deserving of it.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes we get in this mindset of, man, all the extra things, extracurricular things that I do in the name of Jesus, like that's just so many bonus points for me in Christianity. It's like, no, like that is Christianity. Like that is what it means to follow Jesus, is to give him everything. It was never supposed to be a Sunday thing or a Wednesday night thing, or even just a morning time thing. It was supposed to be an all day thing. And we've got to get out of that mindset, especially in like Western American Christianity. Like it's so easy for us to get wrapped up into like compartmentalizing our faith into different places
Yeah.
without giving him everything. But when we do that, we both grow as people and we're fulfilled in us growing as people because we're growing with purpose. And I'm not just building muscle or building a company or building a family for me. I'm doing it for a greater reason. And that's way more fulfilling than looking back at the end of my life and be like, look at all the things I did in the name of Jake. It's like, no, look at all the things that I did in the name of Jesus. And I think that's where those two things, they come together.
Yeah, like that's a great point when it comes to, and it ties so perfectly in with your sermon from last week, which I want to dig into here in a second. But just like we have done, we've done a poor job at giving God his own area, or giving like my faith is my own is a certain category of my life.
Yep.
And then I have all these other categories. And how can I, like most Christians today would say, how can I prioritize my faith and then figure out room for my other categories? Like that would
Yep.
be the ideal for most people, rather than saying, no, like our faith is an umbrella and everything else falls under that, and figuring out how they can align together to ultimately work towards glorifying God through those avenues, I think is a really cool headspace to get into. But there was a sermon that you had last week, which I took so much out of, and it relates so perfectly with, not like all of these things you just hit on: going to the gym, giving God your Monday mornings, building a business. All of these are good things, right? It's not like they're bad things. And
Right.
this is in line with the sermon series that that you're doing. It's when good becomes God, right? That's
Right.
the title
Right.
of it.
Yep.
So
Nailed it.
rather than demonizing these things as things that are, overshadowing our faith, let's align those. Let's talk about how good they are, but they don't, when those good things become ultimate things, become infinite things, become things that we prioritize above anything else. That's when we're placing them at the Godhead, which is when they start to they can start to play the role of something evil in our lives. But at the end of the
Yep.
day, how can we start to how can we start to align everything we're doing under the umbrella, under the built on the foundation of our faith? So I'd love to hear a little bit about the just give me the quick thesis, the quick
Yeah,
synopsis
yeah, yeah.
of the sermon. Let's dive into it a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, it is a lot of what we've been talking about, but essentially this idea that we have made God our first thing at best. I wouldn't even, sometimes that's really generous of me to even say that I'm giving God my best or my first. But we've been so focused on giving God our first and making him our first priority that he just becomes like the top thing on a list. Like if you were to list out the top 5 most important areas of your life and you were to put God or faith or church or whatever you would call it, number 1, what we've unintentionally done is by putting him first, we've separated him from everything else. Like because he's first on the list, that means he's also distinct from the second, third, fourth, fifth thing. Like he's not involved. When God doesn't want to be the first thing on the list, he doesn't want to be the first, the first thing, but he wants to be everything. He wants to be all of it. And not only does he want to be that, he wants to be that because he knows that's what's best for us. But at the end of the day, it's not just him wanting it. Like, oh, it'd be really nice if I did that. It's like that is what he deserves because he is God. And I think sometimes like we forget that he is God. And it's not that we're inviting him into everything and doing all of it to the glory of God to try and earn something, but it's because we recognize that he closed the gap in the relationship that we have with him that we could not close ourselves. We could not earn it. We could not do anything to deserve it. And yet when he sent Jesus to die on the cross and raised from the dead, and he closed that relational gap so that we could spend eternity with him, like it's in that moment that we realize like, man, he deserves this, even if it's not something that like feels good or is necessarily what we want to do. So, yeah, I feel like that's it. And it's one of those things where I tell people all the time, like as I'm writing sermons, I'm like, golly, like the sermons that I get the most passionate about are the ones that I feel like I struggle with the most. Like it's the things that I need that. Like I need the like reminder that everything, because even in ministry and even in the church things that we do, even in serving on a Sunday, if you were to serve in a church somewhere, or even attending church or starting your morning like we can turn those things into things that we do for us, which is such a crazy, like twisted thing the enemy has done, is take the things that we do for God to make them things that we do for ourselves. But yeah, it really all comes back to that.
Yeah, no, I mean, and it makes so much sense. Is like how like we were saying before, like how can we take everything we're doing and use everything to answer the question of how are we glorifying God through the actions that we're taking. Another concept you talked about throughout the sermon was the just the idea of or the necessity of renewing our minds. And there were a couple different pieces of scripture you hit on with that, but what does it look like to renew our minds, whether if it's involving our spiritual life or whether if it's involving our personal life? Like I'd love for you to just talk about that concept a little bit.
Yeah, it's interesting because when you talk about renewing your mind, we kind of typically go to the, you know, renewing your mind in the sense of like we read our Bible, we listen to Christian music, and all of great things that we should do, and that is a piece of renewing your mind. But I think there's also a renewing your mind of like seeing the world as all a means, kind of in this conversation, all a means of working for God. And it's all a means of glorifying God. It's all a means of bringing him honor and those things. And like, that's kind of the shift. And it's something to like, it's like you have to constantly check on it. Like not just like in the morning, like I know some people, and I do this to a degree. Like if there's something that I need to like focus on, like I'll put it on my mirror, I'll put it in my car, like, the review or like the whatever, the, little window thing, mirror thing in the
Yeah.
car, what I'm talking about, whatever it's called. Like you put things there because you want to know them and you want to remember them. And that's really, really great. But it's like, it can't just be a morning thing. Like it has to be an all the time thing. And so I think it's like coming back to like, man, I'm walking into this meeting. Like I've got a meeting in an hour and I'm walking into this meeting and it's like, God, I want to lead this meeting in a way that honors you. I want to talk to these people in a way that honors you. I want to honor the people in the room in a way that honors you. I want to be effective so that we can glorify you with the work that we're doing. Or I'm going later this afternoon, going to premarital counseling. God, I want this to be productive because we want to establish a marriage. It's like, it's renewing the mindset of like bringing him into everything. It's almost as if like it's like if Jesus was he was a physical person, but if he was still a physical person with us today, like he's with you and he's walking with you, and he's doing that through the Holy Spirit that's within you if you're a follower of Jesus. He is with you, but we forget that he is. And I think the mindset shift, yes, it's like getting in scripture, and yes, it's listening to music and listening to podcasts, watching shows, all those things that are taking our mind off of the world and setting them on heavenly things. But I think the most heavenly thing that we can do, the most heavenly place that we can set our minds, Paul writes at the beginning of Colossians 3 that we have to set our minds and our thoughts on things that are our hearts and our minds on things above. I think the way that we do that is remembering that he's with us. And that's the shift we got to make, is remembering, like, the way that we set our mind there is by remembering that he's with us here. And so I think that's like the biggest, that's the biggest like rewire that we have to do, because our brains don't naturally go there. We like things to be neat, especially in the world that we live in, where we have so much information. Life can be overwhelming. There's a million and one things to do in a day. So it makes sense for us to try and compartmentalize and keep things neat and separate and organized. But we've kind of played ourselves in that way of to your point, like the things that we're trying to control and keep organized in a box, like they're in much better hands if it's not in ours, but in the hands of the one who created us and created everything that we see. And so, yeah, I think that's the shift we got to make.
Yeah. So if I'm someone who's saying, I see the benefit in the idea of renewing my mind to be, so that I can actually act in a way that's more in line with what God's will for my life is. What does that renewal look like from a practical standpoint? Like in action, what does it look like for me to renew my mind?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I feel like you hit the nail on the head. Of a lot of times this is one of those things that, like, it sounds like a really great idea, and then
Yeah.
you might work at it really hard for a day or two, and then you just, yeah, you kind of let it go. I think like practically, like for me, like what this looks like is, I mean, there are certain people in my life that I've gone to and been like, hey, I'm sorry that our relationship has not been more about, like, I mean, I did this with Caroline. I mean, we were in premarital counseling, and I was like, I'm sorry that our relationship has not been more focused on God. Like, I wish that we would talk about God more. I wish that we would talk about the things that, like invite him into the conversations that you're having. Like bring him up in, conversations with friends or a spouse or your kids. Like, hey, what are you learning about God? And it doesn't have to be like this weird, like, even, like we're on the side of the road evangelist, like street preacher vibe. It can just be like, hey, I learned something today in my quiet time. I was reading the Bible, like, and that I'm really excited about. Can I share that with you? Or like, hey, what's something that you're learning right now that we could talk about? And I think the more that we do that and we just make it normal, like, I think I was telling someone the other day, I was like, why has it become weird for us to talk about Jesus when we're not at church? Like, why is
Yeah.
it weird for me to talk about, not even just like about G, but faith in general? Like, I'm on this pickleball team right now, and there's some people that I have no idea what they believe. And it's like, man, what if the reason I'm on this team is so that, they get to see Jesus through me, and not in this weird, like, I only do things to convert people, but like also kind of because that's like what we've been called to do. Like, that's the Great Commission. And so, like, there is like a calling into everything that we've done to point people to Jesus. But I kind of struggled, to be honest, and I'm a pastor,
Yeah.
but I struggled with, how do I do that? And I was like, why is that? Let me just start talking about what I did. How was your weekend? Oh, cool. Here's what I did. And then boom, I have to talk about church because I went to church and that's what was involved in my weekend. And so now all of a sudden I'm talking about God, and, you kind of can feel out if people are responding well to that, and those sorts of things. You can have discernment in those moments, but I think making it more normal to talk about our faith and talk about God and talk about what we're learning, and then inviting that, especially within believers. Like, man, it is embarrassing the amount of relationships I have, friendships that I have with people who also believe in Jesus that I never talk about him with. And that's like, like Paul literally talks about, like, and in Hebrews, even it talks about, like, several times Paul talks about it, talks about in Hebrews, whoever the author is, like, we're to stir one another on in good works. And we can't do that if we're not talking about him. And I think that's the simplest way to, like, bring him into everything, is like in all these different relationships or these different areas, buckets of my life, whether it's recreational sports or in my finances or my family, like, bring him into a conversation and invite him into it in, like, a practical way of just talking about him, and just start there and see where it goes. And I think what would be so surprising is that I think a lot of more people want to do that. They're just waiting on someone to do it first. And it's
Mm,
sometimes, like, being a follower of Jesus means that you just got to go first. And it might be awkward and uncomfortable to do that, but you just have to, because, like, that, like, someone has to, and so that's just kind of what I've learned in my life, is that a lot of people really a lot of people want to do a lot of things, but they're waiting on someone who's bold and courageous to go first. And Paul tells Timothy, like, we haven't been given a spirit of fear, but of courage and a sound
mm.
mind. And so we just have to be people of courage to invite him into those things. And it might feel weird and it might feel radical and scary, but, like, at the same time, like, I think that's what our world needs, is for some people to be bold and radical. And because what everyone is trying to do and what the world is trying to get to work isn't working anymore. And so I think there's a need for people to just be radical about their faith. And it's not even that radical. It's just talking about it.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, if we look around us, what the world, the patterns of this world, and alluding to Romans 12:2, like, God calls or tells us, commands us to not conform to the patterns of this world. And if, I mean,
Right.
anybody who looks around at what mediocrity looks like or what normal looks like in the world today, it's not too good if we're going to be honest with ourselves.
No.
But to answer your question, or not answer the question, but to hit on the point you made earlier of, like, why is it so weird to talk about God
Mm,
and our faith outside of church today? And going back to what we were talking about earlier, I think it's because we've given God his own category. We've given him his own area of our life. And when you give something its own area, typically there's a certain time and place where that area needs to be
yep.
addressed. And if you address it at a time or a place where it doesn't feel like their time or place is, then it's going to feel weird or uncomfortable or awkward. But if God is incorporated into the fabric of our everyday life, then I think that's when that's when it becomes so much more natural, because we're not doing things in certain areas, but everything is done built on the foundation of God himself.
Yeah, totally.
Cool. Well, one as we kind of wrap up, there's one topic or question I really like to hit on, just on really the brand of Take a Step, being that,
Mm,
so many guys get caught in this trap of, figure doing what they feel like they're supposed to be doing, whether if it's, what whether they're searching for the approval of others, whether if it's based on insecurities, whether if it's based on a fear of failure or judgment. People get caught in this trap of just kind of like living a life of complacency. And obviously from you were one that took that step, moving away from this world of being driven to be a doctor to moving in the world of ministry, because you found what you felt like God was calling you into. So in your opinion, how can young men who feel stuck finally take more purposeful action towards a life that will actually
mm,
be fulfilling for them?
hmm. Yeah, that's a great question. I think I think the answer to the question, I think you kind of answer the question in the question, sort of, like, I think purposeful action is it's the purpose in the purposeful action. And people don't even realize, like, we have the purpose, like, I'm going to this job to make money, or, I want to have a great relationship with a spouse or my kids, because I want to feel like it's I think we've misplaced the purpose. And I think that you kind of have to back up. Like, whenever I've been stuck, like, I feel like it honestly happens more times, even in a career like this, where it's like, oh, your purpose is, like, baked in because you're doing things for God. There are plenty of times where I've been stuck and kind of felt like, man, am I doing the right thing? Is this what I'm supposed to be doing? Is there something that needs to switch up? And I feel like every single time I get into that headspace, it's really because I've lost, like, my ultimate sense of purpose. And I'm realizing that I'm doing things for numbers sake, or I'm doing things for, like, relationships sake, or I'm doing things for, like, my name's sake. and I've lost the sense of like this, it's all supposed to be for God's name's sake. And I feel like that I think, and that applies to followers of Jesus. I would even say if you're not a follower of Jesus, the same concept can apply of what is your ultimate purpose? Because sometimes we get so in it that we forget what we're doing it for. Just because it's just a rat race. Like, it really is of like, we just have jobs because we're supposed to have jobs, and you go to a 4-year university because you're supposed to go to a 4-year university to get a degree, and you move to a city because you're supposed to move, and you buy a house because you're supposed to buy, and it's like those can be really, really great things, but I think that sometimes we just do things to do things, like you said, and I think you have to back up before you take a step in any direction. You have to make sure that you even know the direction that you're supposed to be heading. And I think that's what we're missing is the sense of direction, because we're trying to establish it for ourselves. But I think when you can back up and say, okay, what am I doing this for? And if you're a follower of Jesus, hopefully the answer is I am doing this to bring God glory. And if that's not why, if you're trying to follow Jesus and you find yourself saying, well, that I don't know if that's really why, then I think that's a great place to wrestle and to start with. It's like, why don't I want to do like what, why is this? Why is it so natural for me to separate this? Why is it so hard for me to let go and give God control of an area of our life? And I think when you can figure that out and kind of backtrack a little bit, I think that's actually the first step. Sometimes we think that a step has to be forward. Sometimes a step can be backward for a second and take assessment to make sure that we're going to head in the right direction. And so, yeah, I think it really is just like asking yourself some really important questions. Like, man, am I making, purposeful actions? No. Okay. Then what is my purpose? Because I'm making actions, but if they're not purposeful, then clearly I don't actually know what my purpose is. And if you can back that up, then I think you can probably find the answer and head in a good direction. And like, again, like invite God into that. Like I think, and invite your community of people into that. Like, especially if you have like a small group of people who also follow Jesus, like ask them to pray for you. Like, again, that feels so strange for us today to go to a brother or sister in Jesus and to say, hey, I'm really stuck at work, or I'm really like trying to figure out, like, I feel like I'm grappling for purpose here. Would you guys pray for me and encourage me and all those things? Like, that isn't weird. That's what the church has been doing for centuries. All of a sudden, we just decided that it was weird and it was taboo to do that. And I think that when you do that, you actually find that there's a lot of people with the Holy Spirit in them who can speak through you, that God can speak through the people in your life. God can speak to you and help you find that. And sometimes the answer really is just like, man, what am I doing this all for? But I think if you start there, your steps start to become a lot more clear. I'll kind of reference the quote that I said at the beginning of this, like God's will for your life, God's purpose for your life, however you want to say that, because sometimes people get weird about God's will and that phrase, but God's plan for your life, it is not a tightrope. And I think sometimes we get stuck because we're on this tightrope, and I think I'm going to be on this forever, and I'm doing this balancing act of trying to keep it all together, and I think I have to do that forever. But it's not a tightrope, it's a river. And you just jump in and say, God, I want to follow you, and if you can genuinely be open to that and be open to where he takes you, I think that every action in your life will feel more purposeful. Even if it's not what you thought you were going to do, it feels more purposeful because it's with the person that you're supposed to be with, which is Jesus. And so I don't know, hopefully that makes sense.
No, yeah. And like for me, all I can think about, which I've talked about before, is the difference between the question of what versus the question of why. I think answering the question why can be life-changing, and it was life-changing for me. And I say that because of personal experience of not only being able to answer what am I doing, but why am I doing it? Like, and I think that the shift there can completely transform the actions that you're actually taking. If I can't give you a good answer for why, or if I give you an answer that I know is not an answer that's worth it. If my honest answer for what I was doing, 4 years ago in my professional life, if someone were to have asked me why am I doing what I'm doing, if I were to answer honestly, it would have been a completely, worldly answer. It would have
Mm.
been, something based on, I feel like this is what I'm supposed to be doing. Everyone jumps into corporate America. I have a great title. I have great long-term security and benefits, and the pay is great. I can have a quote unquote successful life by the world standards in 10 years and, retired retired wealthy and being able, but like, for me, all of those answers, like I know that why is extremely shallow. Like there's
Yeah.
nothing, there's no part of that why that is in line with what I believe God's will for my life is. So that called me to take new action. That called me to take a different
Yeah.
step, which is where this whole thing came from. So I love that answer of like it's not always a step forward. Sometimes it's a step back to really analyze and answer the question of why am I doing what I'm
Yeah.
doing, and sometimes that calls for a pivot.
Yeah. Well, because sometimes you get to your why or what you thought was your why, and it's so unfulfilling and it's not
Mm-hmm.
purposeful. And it doesn't feel like you're winning in what you're trying to do because your why was like, well, I just want to make a lot of money. And then you get a lot of money and you're like, well, dang, like that wasn't like sometimes I think we know what the why is, but until we've realized that the initial why isn't actually fulfilling or satisfying, then I think that's where I mean it's the reason that Gen Z right now is the most spiritually curious generation.
Yeah.
I mean there's that there's like some research to show that just like we Gen Z is so curious like spiritually of why like there has to be something more than this. I was literally listening to a podcast the other day where this guy was like, there has to be more than what I'm experiencing. And I think that a lot of that just comes back to people have tried all the whys that the world's trying to offer, like making a lot of money, being successful, making a name for yourself. We've tried all of it, but at the end of the day, there is a why that's greater than all of that. And it's Jesus. It's living your life for the glory of God. So
Did
that's
you
what I'm going
ever
to aim to do.
Yeah, did you ever hear the Tom Brady interview, the 60 Minutes episode he was on?
No, I didn't know.
So a few years ago, I hate to say this, but I think it was after the Atlanta Super Bowl.
Yeah,
But
tough.
it was, yeah. So they had him on 60 Minutes, and they were like, I think that was that his fifth or sixth Super Bowl, one of the two.
Too many.
Yeah, too many. I think it was his fifth. But they were asking him. The reporter was asking him. He said, "Okay, Tom, you've won 5 Super Bowls. You have a supermodel wife. You're a member at every country club anyone could ever imagine. You have more money stacked in your bank account than anyone could ever dream of. Um, do you feel fulfilled, or like do you feel
Mm,
like you've made it?" And his answer to that literally was, "Quote: There's got to be more to life than this."
yeah,
Which most people can't fathom because they look at that and they're
right,
like, that is the dream future for most people
right.
who are quote unquote conforming to the patterns of this world. Like from anyone with outside a biblical worldview would look at that life and say that is the dream, that is the ideal future. And somebody who is in those shoes is looking at the camera, looking at the reporter, and saying there's got to be more than this.
Yeah,
Now that interview did not end up coming around to Jesus being the answer, but me as a Christian, I look at that and I say because there's something there's something missing. There's something that's
mm,
fulfilling that everybody needs that is missing, and it's Jesus. So I think it's really cool to look at that and hear, there's always something we can be working towards in a worldly perspective, but it's never going to be enough to fill you up.
yep. That's exactly right.
Cool, man. Well, this has been an awesome conversation. I hope I hope you've taken a lot away from it. I know I have. I know everyone listening to has. So I appreciate you jumping on today. But I'd love for you to, I'd love if anyone's, interested in what you're doing and what you're building, where can they follow along with you, whether if it's on social or just anything at all?
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, on Instagram, the Living Room Woodstock is our college ministry. I'm not really active on my personal Instagram more than just like liking things and ghost following people. But yeah, you can follow along at the Living Room and kind of see all the things that God's doing. It is really encouraging. I mean, I'm biased obviously because it's the ministry I lead, but it's really encouraging to see a generation that is coming alive. And I think it's we talk about the next generation all the time, but like this really is like the generation that is shaping the church now. And I think it's really special what God's doing. There's a hunger, and we're seeing that on college campuses across the nation, but we're experiencing it here too. Like there just is a hunger for Jesus and kind of going back to like the root of why we follow Jesus. And so it's really exciting to watch.
Awesome. Well, Jake, this has been great. I appreciate you jumping on today.
Totally.
Awesome. Well, guys, thanks for listening to another episode of the Take a Step podcast. Please leave a rating or a review on whichever platform you're listening on. Always remember, no matter where you are in your growth journey, every mile begins with a step. We'll talk to you in the next episode.